Recorded Books and RB Digital present Border Bandits, Border Raids by W.C. Jameson. Narrated by Luis Moreno. Introduction. In glorifying and praising the U.S. military, magazines and books have often pointed out that this country has never been invaded by a foreign power, or anyone else for that matter. This position has often been voiced at Memorial Day rallies, Veterans of Foreign Wars gatherings, and other patriotic assemblies. Praise for this stated accomplishment has been manifested and national pride for such expressed for decades. But it is not true. The United States has, in truth, been invaded on numerous occasions by foreign military and bandits, and the results were often disastrous. The Mexican armies of Generals Pancho Villa and Venustiano Carranza conducted several cross-border raids, ostensibly to procure arms, ammunition, supplies, and food. In addition, Mexican bandits, sometimes organized and sometimes spontaneous, undertook raids into American settlements along the border, leaving death and destruction in their wake. Such raids, and there were many, were responded to by the U.S. military and the Texas Rangers, as well as local, county, and state law enforcement agencies. Retaliation raids into Mexico by the U.S. cavalry and Texas Rangers were not uncommon. The concept of a border varies with culture. Some cultures perceive a border as a firmly established line, a boundary, across which one may not pass unless equipped with specific authority or permission to do so. Citizens of the United States, for the most part, perceive a border in this manner. Boundaries between states and counties are respected and honored as a result of this tradition, to the degree that the regions circumscribed by such boundaries will manifest their own rules, regulations, politics, cultures, and social systems. Though neighbors, the United States and Mexico could not be more different in how they perceive the border separating the two countries. To those steeped in Mexican culture, a border is simply a line. It can be a fence, a river, or a pen mark on a map, but it does not hold the authoritative energy and power for them as it does Americans. When a Mexican arrives at a border, he crosses it without a second thought, simply because his destination happens to be on the other side. This difference in philosophy has created numerous tensions and difficulties between the two nations for nearly 2 centuries. Life along the U.S.-Mexico border during the last half of the 19th century and the first 3 decades of the 20th century was sometimes fraught with danger. Mexican nationals often crossed the border to steal cattle and horses from American ranches. In the process, men on both sides were often killed and wounded. Likewise, a number of prominent cattle ranches in Texas were initially stocked with cattle stolen from Mexico during acquisition raids. When incursions from Mexico became more common and threatening, reinforcements were called in the form of the U.S. Army and the Texas Rangers. These forces were intended to serve as deterrents, but following particularly aggressive and violent raids, the agents often became involved in aggressive pursuit and punishment. Results were mixed. The U.S. military was initially ill-equipped to deal with the rugged terrain of the border country from the West Texas desert mountain region all the way down the Rio Grande to the Gulf of Mexico. Men and horses suffered, and commands proved futile, until their leaders could get their bearings and gain sufficient knowledge accumulated from experience. By the same token, the enemy, in the form of Mexican nationals, had lived and thrived in these environments for thousands of years, were well adapted to terrain and conditions, and were natural guerrilla fighters. What they lacked was numbers, and in time the U.S. military simply overran and wore down the opposition by virtue of superior numbers and armament. The early Texas Ranger bands proved to be a clear threat and danger to the Mexican communities along the border. In spite of the heroic portrayals
Sample complete. Ready to continue?